exactly why they belong to that tribe. And you look again in another part of the two freezes, they just freeze and stare at each other. Neither one would have the heat big sense to go back to right. And so he said to himself, thank ye, big spirit in the sky, for one Speedy. But here's what Speedy would do. He'd be walking down the aisle just as the rest of them. But when Speedy came to a freezy, he would say, heat left or heat right. He wouldn't freeze. And immediately the problem of a narrow passageway was solved. No hesitation. It's Speedy left, right, whatever it was. Oh, he could think fast. But oh, the tribe of freezing. They would glare at each other. They couldn't even lift their hands to go, me heat big left, you heat big right. So the big chief decided to help them. And so he said, all of you braves and bravettes will wake up in heat big wigwam. And when you come together, you will turn into the tribe of Speedy. You will do something besides standing there and staring, wanting the other one to make the first heat big wigwam signal. What do you want, a smoke signal? That's just the first year. Wake up, be heat big brave, don't stand and stare. Watch how Speedy does it. You may be big chiefs yourself someday. And tears flowed down the chief's eyes, and he stood in his chair watching all the freezies out there. And he hoped that they would listen to his big tribal council medicine and follow his advice, because it's a part of waking up. And that's the end of the land of the sky blue line. Let me start by asking you some questions. How many of you are sad? Anything to be sad?
Vernon Howard.
How many of you are bewildered by life? And how many of you are afraid of the future? Raise your hand. Well, we could go on all night on that, couldn't we? Now, what do you expect? I ask if you're sad and you raise your hand. I ask if you're depressed, confused, and don't know what life is all about, and you raise your hands. Now, how old are you? How long have you been enduring this condition? If you don't listen to what I'm going to tell you now, I'll raise my hand again 5 or 10 years from now and ask you to raise your hand, and you will. Because nothing will have been changed. How do you expect to change something without changing something? How do you expect your inner nature to be different unless you follow a right, true course for changing it? You live in hope, don't you? You live in hope that something is going to come along and do something for you. It never has, and it never will. And I want to tell you, you better listen to me, or you will get to the point where you're going to fall madly in love with all your problems, with all your difficulties. And you're going to start enjoying something that is very, very strange. You're going to find your chief pleasure, your chief enjoyment in being defeated. What you're doing right now, which is your condition right now as I'm talking to you, you are defeated, you know. You don't know what life is all about. You don't know what you're doing here. You even come to these classes or hear talks read books. You absorb them, you think, and nothing changes internally. Maybe I better go back to basics and tell you what this is all about, why we're here in the first place. We're here because you don't have to any longer be who you've been in the past. Already you're resisting. Already there are shadows inside of you when I said that, and I know why. You have so much fun chasing around. What you call fun is simply wasting your life because you have certain standards, certain ideas as to what life is all about, and you conform to your own definition of it. How pathetic. See, all you've ever known is defeat. This is what was passed on to you by your friends, by your own encounters out in the world. And you were defeated. Now let's look at the defeat, and I'll tell you what it was. Your defeat was simply the denial of something you thought you wanted, something you thought you needed, and that's what you call defeat. You'll find out, as we're talking here today, you'll find out how to rise up and revolt against loving your own disastrous defeats in life because they give you a false pleasure. And they make you the center of attention of your own life. How tragic. You understand, don't you? Or do you? You have no real good cheer in your life. You don't know what it means to have a pleasant day. The weather could be beautiful out there, can it? And it gives you a certain little natural thrill when spring first comes, and you say, what a beautiful day. You can have a beautiful day all the time. You can be cheerful all the time. You can win in a new way all the time if you'll do one thing. One thing that's going to take you years. If you investigate why you refuse to listen to something that is higher than you. The way you're living now, you call that sacred? You call that fun? What's the matter with your mind? Lacerating yourself all day and night. Worrying. And you love the worries.
I really don't.
Now, I want to tell you something that you don't know and that you won't understand what I tell you, but it's a fact. And you can't know it. You can live without the false pleasure of anger. You can truly live without the false pleasure of being depressed. How about the word confusion? You're confused, are you not? The smallest thing can upset you. See, you're living from feelings. And you hope that the feelings are going to hold you up. And a letter comes, or the phone call comes, or the glance comes from someone else, and you're gone. Let me tell you how sad it is for you that you don't have a life of your own. You know how you'd be different if you had a life of your own? You wouldn't live in time for one thing as you now do. You wouldn't look forward to all the excitements that you now look forward to. At the same time, fear them because you kind of sense that there's something more than a timeline. Examine yourselves even as I'm talking to you now, as we're communicating in a certain way. Examine yourselves and see what you have and what you are. Now, I'll tell you for about the fourth time already that if you want something different, then And you're going to have to have something that is different from you, from what you call your kind of life. You can't keep driving recklessly down that highway the way you're going now and loving the accidents. That never occurred to you that you even love the accidents you have along the inner highway? Give you an excuse to get angry at someone who didn't fix the road the way you wanted it.
Oh,
Who didn't cause the road to bend the way you wanted it to bend, so you can lash out at someone.
Yeah.
And we might pause just there a little bit and you examine, what's this compulsive need you have to have enemies? Come on, let's look at it. How about just today? The thoughts and feelings that went through you against that person, against that organization, against someone who seemed to be threatening you, someone who makes demands on you. What is this compulsion you have to keep thinking about it, thinking about her, running it over and over and over in your mind? Ladies and gentlemen, that is called deliberate self-torment. You know, the morals of the inner adventure, which we're exploring here, is for you to take one little fact, like the one I just presented, about needing to have enemies, needing to complain. Take just one of those and make one small attempt to understand it and to work with it. So that maybe tomorrow, or maybe the next day, you'll be going about your business, and for the first time in your life, you'll see what I just said. That is, you will see that there's something strange inside of you, a shadowy figure inside of you.
It's true.
That loves to talk about enemies. That loves to occupy the mind and emotions, the surging emotions, with thinking about other people. Those who hurt you, those who offend you, those who don't compliment you. I want to tell you, as you don't begin to know how badly your system operates.
No, go get some rejection today. Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Not tomorrow.
You catch yourself
in a few hours.
Right in the middle of a hostile thought, an aggressive feeling. You stand aside and you catch yourself right in the middle of it. I'll tell you what that's called. That's called an authentic spiritual experience, which very few human beings ever have.
All right, Vern. Boy, Exceptional Perception was the guy who turned me on to the Dąbrowski model of positive disintegration. But as time has gone on, I begin to see Truth is Eternal, Western Esotericism, and the Dark Ages. Oh, that's 6 months ago. We Are Your Friends. Darkness and Light, Post-Nothingness, Nicole Madsen, The Noetic Society, Unslaved Films. Wow. Capaccio, Free Your Mind. All Michael Sarian. He added Gurdjieff books to his link here. The only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing. Amen to that. Man can only attain knowledge with the help of those who possess it. This must be understood from the very beginning. One must learn from him who knows. Hope with doubt. Wait, hope with weakness. Wait. Well, this guy hasn't posted in years. Passionate people. Yes, I reckon so. Paisajes del mundo. Lego life. Productivity. That was useful. WordPress tips and tutorials. Chrome ecosystem, Chrome OS, Chromebooks. Oh my God. Oh, it looks. Oh, well, let me share the screen here. Looks like Chrome will be exclusive Lenovo launching new Chrome OS yoga book. That sounds nice. I have to say, don't be evil. Makes me like Google over Yahoo. And what's more, I see the direction that these Microsoft people are going. I'll say that people I know personally, and they're not terribly concerned with the quality of their souls. I could be utterly deluded, but I think not. I think I'll keep my own counsel and justify myself to no one. Screen share again. Oh. Okay, screen share it is. Yeah. Today I found out. Let's have a look.
Would you like to be more interesting? Here on the Today I Found Out YouTube channel, we answer the questions that you didn't know you had. We've got so many videos on fascinating topics that you will never run out of things to say at the water cooler. Like, why we throw coins into fountains. Oh, yeah, that's not real. Why some eggs are brown and others are white. Why people look more attractive when you've been drinking. And why and how the Romans made people disappear from history. All that and much, much more. We put out brand new videos every day, so you're sure to get a daily dose of knowledge. Subscribe now by clicking on the screen on this big red subscribe button, or I'll also put a link in the video description. Thanks for watching, and we really look forward to seeing you on the channel.
Simon Whistler. Yes, well, I want to be positive about those people who've come along late and not be too crazy. Since Guruji's sacred dances. I have not seen this.
Be sure to hop on over to the Spiritual Broadcast Network. It's the go-to place for all things spiritual. You'll discover internet television shows that you won't find anywhere else. You can also choose from hundreds of hours of spiritual documentaries and movies. You'll enjoy on-demand and live internet television programming 24/7. Best of all, we add new dramas, comedies, talk, and reality shows and more on a daily basis. So why spend countless hours searching the web when you can quickly find just what you want on the spiritual?
I feel as if they're bailiffs watching me.
Wisdom
to
Through
try to
Action
determine
is a contemporary sea
the amount
influence
of
school teaching the work of personal inner development in the system brought to the Western world by G.I. Gurdjieff and P.D. Ouspensky. Mr. Ouspensky said, "The most important ideas and principles of this system do not belong to me. This is chiefly what makes them valuable, because if they belonged to me, they would be like all other theories invented by ordinary minds." What he meant was that this system comes from higher mind, from conscious influence. It is an objective system to bring a man to awakening.
Welcome to Wisdom Through Action. I'm your host, Kay Smith. With each of our shows, we are bringing the work of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky to life in the electronic world, discussing lines of work and the cosmology of the system. Today's show is about a different line of work that we teach also here at Wisdom Through Action, Gurdjieff's sacred dances. Before we start, I'm going to read a passage from C.S. Knott's book, Teachings of Gurdjieff, the Journal of a Pupil. The demonstration this evening will consist chiefly of various movements of the human body taken from the art of the ancient East. Examples of sacred gymnastics, sacred dances, and religious ceremonies preserved in certain temples in Turkestan, Tibet, Afghanistan, Kafiristan, Chitral, and other places. Mr. Gurdjieff, with other members of the Seekers After Truth, carried out over many years in the Near and Far East a series of investigations which prove that in the Orient, certain dances have not lost the deep significance, religious and scientific in the real sense, which they had in the remote past. Sacred dances and posture and movements in series have always been one of the vital subjects taught in esoteric schools in the East. They have a double aim: to convey a certain kind of knowledge and to be a means for acquiring a harmonious state of being. The farthest limits of one's endurance are reached through the combination of non-natural and non-habitual movements. And by performing them a new quality of sensing is obtained, a new quality of concentration and attention, and a new direction of the mind, all for a certain definite aim. Dancing still has quite a different meaning in the East from what we give it in the West. In ancient times, the dance was a branch of real art and served the purposes of higher knowledge and religion. A person who specialized in a subject communicated his knowledge through works of art, particularly dances, as we spread knowledge through books. Among the early Christians, dancing in churches was an important part of the ritual. The ancient sacred dance is not only a medium for an aesthetic experience, but a book, as it were, or script, containing a definite piece of knowledge. But it is a book which not everyone who would can read. A detailed study of sacred dances and special movements and postures over many years has proved their importance in the work of the harmonious development of man. The parallel development of all his powers is one of the principal aims of this work. Exercises and sacred gymnastics are used in this system as one of the means for educating the student's moral force, for developing his will, patience, capacity for thought, concentration, and attention, hearing, sight, sense of touch, and so on. And now, Gurdjieff's sacred dances.
The first of these is Prayer in Seven. It is a movement depicting invocation through physical expression. It is the recognition of the rightful role of man, and moreover, his prayer to something higher to be allowed to fulfill that potential through the practical reception and transmission of energies between heaven and earth. In the past, in the first three repetitions, the dancers and the audience breathe in unison. In the second three repetitions, the dancers and the audience breathe in opposition.
Wow.
In the final seventh repetition, the dancers and the audience hold the breath in an attempt to develop an inner element of concentration of attention. Also, this movement may be an expression of humility.
Before beginning, the pianist and the dancers are stopping thoughts, dividing attention, and self-remembering in order to connect with something higher while performing the sacred dances.
Wow. Let's take a look at the table of hydrogens.
Be sure to hop on over to the Spiritual Broadcast Network, the web, when you can quickly find just what you want on the Spiritual Broadcast Network.
Wisdom Through Action is a contemporary sea-influenced school teaching the work of personal inner development in the system brought to the Western world by G.I. Gurdjieff and P.D. Ouspensky. Mr. Ouspensky said, "The most important ideas and principles of this system do not belong to me. This is chiefly what makes them valuable, because if they belonged to me, they would be like all other theories invented by ordinary minds." What he meant was that this system comes from higher mind, from conscious influence. It is an objective system to bring a man to awakening.
Welcome to Wisdom Through Action. I'm your host, Kay Smith. Today's show is going to increase your understanding of Gurdjieff's table of hydrogens, as well as the 9 influences that are constantly at play in our lives. We will also be discussing ways to verify and respond to these influences.
Good.
We will start with a 20-minute video of Gurdjieff's table of hydrogens.
Now we must speak about the matters from which the universe is made, all the matters of the world surrounding us, the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, the stones of our houses. Our own bodies are permeated by all the matters existing in the universe. There is no need to study or analyze the sun in order to find solar matter. This matter is in us, and it is the result of the division of our atoms. In the same way, we have in us matters of all other worlds. In this sense, man is indeed a miniature universe. He has in him all the matters which compose the universe, the same forces, the same laws which govern the life of the whole world act in him. Therefore, by studying man, we study the universe, and vice versa. But a full parallel between man and the universe can be drawn only if we take man in the full sense of the word, that is, a man whose inherent powers and possibilities are developed. An underdeveloped man, a man who has not completed his evolution, cannot be taken as a complete picture of the world. He is an unfinished world. As has been said earlier, laws are everywhere the same on all planes. These same laws, manifesting in different worlds, that is, in different conditions, produce different phenomena. The study of the relation of laws to the planes on which they manifest them.
Wait a minute. Proto, Io, Macro, Deutero, Meso, Trito, Micro.
Themselves brings us to the study of relativity. If we take the ray of creation, we must remember that the worlds are connected with one another and affect one another in accordance with the law of 3. In other words, the first 3 worlds, taken together, produce the phenomenon which influences the following worlds, and so on. In the first 3 worlds, the absolute is the conductor of the active force, world 3 the conductor of the passive force, and world 6 the conductor of the neutralizing force. In other words, the absolute is carbon, world 3 is oxygen, and world 6 is nitrogen. If we place the 3 forces in sequence according to the order in which they unite, we will get the order 1, 2, 3. But the matters serving as conductors of these forces will, according to their density, stand in the order carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. So, When the triad begins to form, they stand in the order 1, 3, 2. When matter stands in this order, phenomena are produced. But for subsequent creation, for the formation of the next triad, nitrogen must, as it were, return once more to the third place, to the order 1, 2, 3, and in this way become carbon of the next triad. For the second triad comes from the neutralizing force of the first triad becoming active. This change of place of matters in the triad is a kind of cosmic dance, which produces action. Let us now try to see how forces emerging from the absolute in order to manifest themselves in world 3 must first pass through world 6. An analogy shows us quite plainly the necessity of this direction of force. As I said, man's will can influence a fragment of tissue in certain parts of his body, but a tissue is composed of cells. In order to affect the tissue, man's will must first influence the cells composing the given fragment of tissue. The tissue is a different world from cells, but at the same time, tissues do not exist apart from cells, for they are composed of cells. World 3 is a separate world from world 6, and at the same time, it is composed of world 6, that is, of worlds similar to our Milky Way. So in order to influence a part of world 3, all worlds, the absolute must first influence a certain number of worlds, all suns, of which world 3 is composed. Thus, in the passage of forces, worlds 1, 3, 6 stand at first in the order 1, 3, 6, then in the order 1, 6, 3, and then for a further passage of forces, they must again resume the order 1, 3, 6. In the next triad, the Milky Way is carbon, the sun oxygen, and the planets nitrogen. Since nitrogen stands between carbon and oxygen, the force coming from the Milky Way, that is, from the stars, must first pass through the planets in order to reach the sun. This may look strange at the first glance, but if we visualize the structure of the solar system, we shall see quite clearly that it cannot be otherwise. No analogies are needed here. Imagine the sun surrounded by planets moving round it. In the distance, some group of stars from which influences go forth towards the sun. But the sun does not stand in one place. We know that it moves. The planets, rotating round it, move with it in space, forming, each of them by its motion, a spiral around the rod of the sun, so that this central rod is entirely enclosed in the spirals of planets, and no influence can reach it without first passing through the world of planets, that is, penetrating through the rings of the spirals. Further, planets becoming carbon of the third triad must find corresponding oxygen and nitrogen. In our ray of creation, oxygen is Earth, but there is no nitrogen in the astronomical ray of creation. Therefore, the planets cannot pass their influence directly to Earth. And in order to make the passage of forces possible between the planets and the Earth, a special contrivance was created which represents the sensitive organ of the Earth, organic life on Earth. Organic life on Earth is nitrogen of the third triad. Forces coming from the planets fall first on organic life, which receives them and passes them on to the Earth. If we remember the extremely complicated organization of the ends of sensitive nerves in our own organism, for instance, the ends of the nerves of taste and smell, we shall not think it strange that man is defined as the sensitive nerve end of the earth. Of course, a meadow covered with grass differs in many ways from man. It receives only some planetary influences, and quite few of these. Man receives much more complex influences. But people differ greatly from one another in this respect. The majority of men are important only in the mass, and only the mass receives one or another influence, for they are sensitive only to coarse influences. Others are capable of receiving influences individually, influences which masses cannot receive, finer influences. Organic life on Earth, playing the role of nitrogen of the third triad, is by this very fact carbon of the fourth triad in the ray. In other words, it conducts the active force which meets with corresponding oxygen and nitrogen. Earth is oxygen and Moon is nitrogen, through which the influences of organic life pass to Earth. Now, if we take the ray of creation divided into 4 triads and bear in mind that the sum total of each triad is a definite hydrogen, we shall have 4 hydrogens or 4 definite densities of matter. These 4 hydrogens can be as corresponding to the 4 fundamental points of the universe. The first corresponds to the absolute, the second to the sun, the third to the earth, and the fourth to the moon. In the Sphinx, the 4 principles are merged into one. 3 refer to force, and the 4th refers to matter. The tarot is constructed upon the law of 4 principles. The study of the name of God, Jehovah, is spelled in Hebrew with 4 letters, Yod, He, Vav, and He. Kabbalists affirm that every phenomena and every object consists of these 4 principles, that every object and every phenomenon consists.
Yod, active principle, initiative. He, passive principle, inertia. Vav, equilibrium, form. He, result or latent energy.
Of the divine name. I said that the ray of creation can be taken as an octave. After Re, represented by the moon, the octave has its Do, which is also the absolute. So there are, as it were, 2 absolutes. One begins the Re, the other ends it. One absolute is all, the other is nothing. But there can be no 2 absolutes, for
Hang on, let me go. Message Josh. Hey. Bug him. Oh. Huh. Let's paste in that link. If he wants to come around, he can. copy. I think Neil's avoiding me. All right. All I can do. Am I still screen sharing? Yes.
For by its nature, the absolute is one. Therefore, all includes nothing, and nothing includes all. Our dualistically constructed mind cannot take in the identity of opposites. We divide everything, even the absolute. In reality, what we call the antithesis of opposites exists only in our conception, in our subjective perception of the world. But even when we understand this, we are unable to express this understanding in words. Our language has no words which can include simultaneously thesis and antithesis. Our mind cannot grasp them as one idea, just as it cannot grasp the images of some Hindu gods, combining complete opposites in themselves. Now, we shall examine the passage of radiations between the four fundamental points of the cosmic octave. We take radiations between each 2 points in the form of an octave, and thus obtain 3 octaves: absolute sun, sun earth, earth moon. It should be noted that, although there are 6 intervals, only 3 of them require to be filled from without. The intervals between Do and Si are filled at the will of the Absolute, by the influence of the sun's mass on the radiations passing through it, and by the influence of the mass of the earth on the radiations passing through it. All the hydrogens in this table represent matters with which we have to do in studying man. It has been scaled down twice in order to include only the hydrogens that have relation to man, both to his outer life and the inner life of his organism. How do these hydrogens connect with man? For instance, hydrogen 768 represents all the food we eat. The air we breathe is hydrogen 192, and our impressions can be 48, 24, 12, and even 6. We have an enormous range of impressions, but we have no choice of air or food. We cannot inhale, for instance, hydrogen 96, for it is fire, incandescent gases. We cannot eat H384, for it is water, and we cannot live on water. You will see that this table answers all our requirements. It enables us to speak of all the matters in the human machine and to see their interrelation. And it makes it possible to connect man with the universe, because we can know from which level each matter comes. This table of hydrogens shows not only the density of each of them, but also the place of origin of these different layers of matter which are under different laws, as it was explained. Hydrogens, which come from planes under a quite small number of laws, near the will of the Absolute, have an enormous power and enormous potential energy. Thus, we have a scale of 12 densities on which can be placed all matter known to or conceivable by man. For the lower densities, we may find examples both in man and in the world around him. Up to the level of H96 or even 48, these may be studied physically by chemistry, biology, and other sciences. Above hydrogen 48, we can only study psychological effects of their presence or absence, knowing the level of hydrogens with which different centers work. Still higher hydrogens are only potential in man or exist in such small quantities that they are impossible to study. The study of these higher hydrogens in the surrounding world is also beyond the powers of perception of man number 1, 2, and 3. How are the 3 intervals in the 3 octaves of radiations filled? It is a cosmic arrangement. Otherwise, the ray could not exist. They are filled by the forces of nature, just as you will see it in our organism. Some intervals in our organism are filled by nature. Otherwise, we would not be able to live. A hydrogen consists of 3 forces working through 3 elements. 3 forces cannot work without 3 elements. A hydrogen is the sum total. Do impressions generate energy? They are energy in themselves. Every time we take in an impression, we receive a certain matter. Matter is not separate from energy. Where there is matter, there is energy, and where there is energy, there is matter. Organic life is a special adaptation, filling the interval between the planets and the Earth. It is created in the form of a lateral or an additional octave beginning in the sun, Sol. Sol becomes Do and produces Si on the level of the planets, and then 3 notes, La, Sol, Fa, which are organic life on Earth. Then Mi of this lateral octave enters into the Earth and Re into the moon. So organic life belongs not to the main octave, but to this special octave which begins in the sun. We do not know what Do and Si of this octave mean. Out of all this octave, we know only La, Sol, Fa, and Mi. Even about Re, all we know is that when anything dies, whether man or a cockroach, its soul goes to the moon. Do we ever give thanks for the existence of order or appreciate the natural rhythms which we take so much for granted? Yet life is fundamentally a rhythmic process involving expenditure of energy, followed by periods of recuperation. The alternation of day and night provides the opportunity for this necessary replenishment, as also in a longer time scale does the quiescence of winter after the activity of summer.
1001. Makes me think of Rush. Oh wait, I can't play this. I can look up the lyrics. There we go. Wow. Oh, wow. is Absalom? Well, an ill wind comes rising across the cities of the plain. There's no swimming in the heavy water, no singing in the acid rain. Red alert, red alert. It's so hard to stay together passing through revolving doors. We need someone to talk to and someone to sweep the floors. Incomplete, incomplete. The world weighs on my shoulders, but what am I to do? You sometimes drive me crazy, but I worry about you. I know it makes no difference to what you're going through, but I see the tip of the iceberg, and I worry about you. Cruising under your radar, watching from satellite, take a page from a red book and keep them in your sights. Yeah. All right. Of course, the red book, I will guess that that's a reference to Carl Jung. Absalom. Death of Absalom. Hanging from a tree by his hair. Was the third son of David, king of Israel. Oh, lovely. Okay. Well, Absalom, David's third son by Maacah, was born in Hebron and moved at an early age along with the transfer of the capital to Jerusalem, where he spent most of his life. He was a great favorite of his father and the people. His charming manners, personal beauty, and insinuating ways, together with his love of pomp and royal pretensions, captivated the hearts of the people from the beginning. He lived in great style, drove in a magnificent chariot, and had 50 men run before him. Little is known of Absalom's family life, but it is said that he had 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was also Tamar. From the language of Samuel 18:18, it is inferred that his sons died at an early age. 2 Chronicles says Absalom had another daughter named Maacah, who later became the favorite wife of Rehoboam, the murderer of Amnon. After his full sister Tamar was raped by Amnon, their half-brother and David's eldest son Absalom waited 2 years and avenged her by sending his servants to murder Amnon at a feast after he was drunk, to which Absalom had invited the king's sons. After this deed, he fled to Talmai, the king of Geshur, his maternal grandfather, and it was not until 3 years later that he was fully reinstated in his father's favor and finally returned to Jerusalem. While in Jerusalem, Absalom built support for himself by speaking to those who came to King David for justice. See, your claims are good and right, but there is no one deputed by the king to hear you, perhaps reflecting flaws in the judicial system of the United Monarchy. If only I were the judge of the land, then all who had a suit or cause might come to me, and I would give them justice. He made gestures of humility by kissing those who bowed before him instead of accepting supplication. He stole the hearts of the people of Israel. After 4 years, he declared himself king, raised a revolt at Hebron and former capital, and slept with his father's concubines. All Israel and Judah flocked to him. And David, attended only by the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and his former bodyguard, which had followed him from Gath, found it expedient to flee. The priests Zadok and Abithanar remained in Jerusalem, and their sons Johan and Ahimaaz served as David's spies. Absalom reached the capital and consulted with the renowned Achitophel. David took refuge from Absalom's forces beyond the Jordan River. However, the precaution of instructing a servant to infiltrate Absalom's court and subvert it. Hushai, the servant, convinced Absalom to ignore Ahithophel's advice and attack his father while he was on the run, and instead to prepare his forces for a major attack. This gave David critical time to prepare his own troops for the coming battle. The fateful battle was fought in the wood of Ephraim. The name suggests a locality west of Jordan, and Absalom's army was completely routed. Absalom's head was caught in the boughs of an oak tree as a mule was ran beneath it. He was discovered there still alive by one of David's men. Oh, he got hung up by his hair. Who reported it to Joab, the king's commander. Accustomed to avenging himself, he took the opportunity to even score with Absalom. Absalom once had Joab's field set on fire and made Amasa captain of the host instead of Joab. Killing Absalom was against David's command. Beware that none touch the young man Absalom. When David heard that Absalom was killed, although not how he was killed, he greatly sorrowed. Oh, my son Absalom, my son, my son, my son Absalom. Memorial to Absalom. Now Absalom, in his lifetime, had taken and reared up for himself a monument, which is in the king's dale. For he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. And he called the pillar after his own name, and it is called Absalom's monument. Neat. Look at that. The tomb of Absalom. Far out. All right, well. This is 10011 or 1011. Modern scholarship.
The behavior of the natural world conforms to well-established laws of which science has discovered a great deal. Yet the very elegance of some of these laws is a clear indication of the existence of some directing intelligence, and this must of necessity be of a higher order than that of the world which it directs. We have seen that the causes of the events of life lie in the vastly greater unmanifest world beyond the interpretation of the senses. But to understand this, it is evident that a different kind of knowledge will be required, derived from the much finer perceptions of the spiritual realms. This is quite secret knowledge, not accessible to the ordinary intellect, yet it is available to the intuitive mind, which can respond to influences of higher quality than the logic of life. These are called esoteric influences, meaning from within, and which originate from beings who inhabit higher regions of the universe. Gurdjieff called this the conscious circle of humanity. The conscious circle of humanity is concerned with conveying truths and relationships of the real world in a language which can be understood by the mortal mind. This is the inspiration of poets and mystics through the ages, sometimes through actual messengers who inhabit the earth for a time. According to this real knowledge, the universe is not an accidental structure merging into an infinite vastness. This is only the outward appearance of a living intelligence emanating from a supreme or absolute being in a succession of stages of increasing complexity, each having its own intelligence and consciousness.
According to this teaching, when man is born, 3 separate machines are born with him, which continue to form till his death. These machines have nothing in common with one another. They are our body, our essence, and our personality. Their future development, the development of each one separately, depends on the data a man possesses and the data which surrounds him, such as environment, circumstances, geographical conditions, and so on. For the body, this data is heredity, geographical conditions, food, and movement. They do not affect personality. Personality is formed exclusively through what a man hears and through reading. A strong personality is what is acquired through life, views, opinions, words. It develops under a strong influence of what is not its own, of what is acquired, such as other people's beliefs, theories, and judgments. It changes with change of conditions. Personality surrounds essence, enveloping it so that nothing can reach essence. It has to become more transparent so that impressions and external influences will penetrate through and reach essence to allow essence to grow. Defenses have to be prepared before we break the shell of personality surrounding essence. Personality keeps you from certain distant influences. For example, some essences are susceptible to atmospheric changes or change of season. Certain influences come from the planets, the sun, the Milky Way, the moon. Planetary influences are felt generally only by the masses of people and are responsible for wars and revolutions. Because man's essence is underdeveloped, the part that can be affected by the planets is not. To a certain extent, we are under influences of the sun. We can be under much higher influences when we have developed higher centers and become connected with them. When personality is educated and less heavy, many qualities pass into essence and become permanent. Essence is purely emotional. It consists of what is received from heredity before the formation of personality, and later only those sensations and feelings among which a man lives. It includes all the things we were born with: physical features, state of health, certain kinds of predispositions, inclinations, and tendencies. Essence remains the same through life. The center of gravity of the body, its soul, so to speak, is the moving center. The center of gravity of the essence, or its soul, is the emotional center, while the center of gravity of the personality is the intellectual center. These bodies are 3 separate machines that have nothing in common with one another. The body may be healthy and strong and full of courage, while the essence may be timid. Because these bodies were formed independently of one another and have nothing in common with each other, we have to learn how to reestablish what has become lost. We have to learn to distinguish between body, center or function, essence, and personality. Development means passing from one kind of influence to another kind. We are quite under the influences of the moon until we become more and more conscious. The moon's influences can be seen through all of our movements. They are purely mechanical. All of our mechanicalness depends on them. The way to become more free is to not identify, not consider, struggle with negative emotions. We are learning to cut some of the marionette wires. Physical influence of the moon is normal, as the moon affects the tides on the earth. Psychological influences, however, are not normal. When man is cut off from higher centers, the moon can affect our mind and our emotions.
Yeah.
The principle is that everything is connected and things do not exist separately. Now we're going to change scales and address Gurdjieff's teaching of influences on a more personal scale, looking at our centers or functions and the 9 different types of influences that are constantly at play in our lives. Up to now, we have studied how each center responds and communicates. The language of the intellectual function is words. It responds with opinions, argument, agreement, etc. The language of the emotional function is pictures. It responds in a mood change, happy, sad, disappointed, cheerful, excited, and so on. The language of the moving function is movement and inactivity. For example, riding a bike, walking, driving, swimming, or even sitting still, rocking in a chair, and so on. And the language of the instinctive center is sensations. For example, hungry, full, tired, hurting, sense of well-being, and so on. Now, in addition to a language specific to each center or function, each center also has an atmosphere and corresponding emanation. Once reached, the higher centers or master has an atmosphere of self-remembering with emanations of that nature. Depending on the atmosphere of the intellectual center, will determine its emanations. For instance, in an atmosphere of argument and duality, the emanations may be, he is smart, or my opinion of you is that you were a fool. If the atmosphere of the emotional function is happy and cheerful, the emanations may be, I like you. If it is sad and disappointed, the emanations may be something like, well, I want you to like me. Why don't you like me? These next centers, instinctive, moving, and sex center, all fall under a similar atmosphere. For instance, healthy or unhealthy, energetic or lethargic. Some of the emanations might be, I want that food, or sex leaks directed at another person. These atmospheres and corresponding emanations are constantly mixing, changing, and expanding, contracting, strengthening, and weakening, depending on influences coming from outside or inside of us. Our centers or functions can be affected by 9 influences from inside or outside, by an event, a person, or a thing. The first set is referred to as chemical physical. Conscious influence on our higher centers or master, as in Gurdjieff's allegory of the horse, carriage, and driver. The intellectual, there's an intellectual influence also. And there'll be an emotional influence. And finally, there's an instinctive and moving or sexual influence. Next, there are associative influences that also act on us. The first of which is referred to as form, then relationships, as in sympathies and antipathies. Suggestion and persuasion are also under associative influences. The last of the associative influences is referred to as superiority influence. The 9th influence acting upon us is referred to as planetary influences. These 9 influences act on the centers and change our atmosphere and emanations. That is to say, how we respond, whether with self-remembering, arguing, giving an opinion, identifying, becoming negative, running away, eating something, and so on. They go on and on as to how they might manifest. The carriage, our body, has an atmosphere with its own special properties. My feelings also produce an atmosphere, the emanations of which may go a long way. When I think as a result of my associations, the results are emanations of a third kind. When there is a passenger, instead of an empty place in the carriage, emanations are also different, distinct from the emanations of the driver. If the passenger is not a country bumpkin, he thinks of philosophy and not about whiskey. When the driver is not home, the emanations go on mechanically. Thus, every man or woman may have 4 kinds of emanations, but not necessarily. Of some emanations, may have more, of others less. People are different in this respect. And one and the same man may also be different at different times. When we are able to bring self-remembering to the situation, everything changes. Our external relationships depend on us. We can change them if we take right measures. People are inclined to argue with each other. If we act consciously, the interaction will be conscious. If, on the other hand, we act unconsciously, everything will be the result of what we are sending out. That is, our emanations. Chemical physical influences are material in nature and result from the mixture of two substances which produce something new. They arise independently of us. They act from without. It can be something as basic as whether I had tea to drink or a Coca-Cola, both resulting in different emanations. To understand chemical physical influences better, we have to understand what was said about each of our centers or functions having their own emanations and atmospheres. There is always going to be an interaction of some sort. Every minute we are the
See if Neil is interested. Why? Analog.
distinctions between each 2 points in the form of an octave, and thus attain 3 octaves: absolute sun, sun, earth, earth, moon. It should be noted that, although there are 6 intervals, only 3 of them require to be filled from without. All includes
Oh well, yeah, I'm done with this doubtfulness. I've just allowed myself to. Well, clearly, there had to be some more growth and some final lessons about trying to take a feeling out into the world. This is ill-advised. Sure, there's going to be an elevated presence when you're around a bunch of people who are higher up the elevator, as it were. Yeah, Neil's gonna come. Neil. Yeah. Ta-da. Wow. Happy birthday. Um, messaging privately. Just like that. And we'll go Orlando Skidmore. Orlando Skidmore. I'm talking to you. Oh, grab it. Duh. Copy, close. Copy, close, copy, close. Copy, close. Let's catch up. Okay. Over here. Mute that. Oh, well, I don't think he's live right now. All right. Well, never mind.
Nothing, and nothing includes all. Our dualistically constructed mind cannot take in the identity of opposites. We divide everything, even the absolute. In reality, what we call the antithesis of opposites exists only in our conception, in our subjective perception of the world. But even when...
Wait a minute. Why didn't I invite David Bose? A new message to David Bose. Hey, man. Yet another hangout. Talk. Am I screen sharing? Yes. So this is the first apocalypse of James, and the first I've looked at it. So, in the Gospel of Thomas, it says, well, who should we go and talk? Who should we turn to when you are gone? Actually, let me just pull it up. I don't want to quote it incorrectly. And we'll go to the Meyer translation. And we'll go to do not do what you hate. I love that. This heaven will pass away and the one above it will pass away. The dead are not alive, and the living will not die. During the days when you ate what is dead, you made it alive. When you're in the light, what will you do? On the day when you were one, you became two. But when you became two, what will you do? That's a tough question. Okay, here it is, number 12. The student said to Yeshua, "We know you will lead us. Who will be our leader?" And Yeshua said to them, "Wherever you are, seek out Yaakov the just." Well, that's James the just. "For his sake, heaven and earth came into being." So we must find Yaakov. Yeshua said to his students, "Compare me to something and tell me what I'm like." Shimon Kepha said to him, "You are like a just messenger." Mattai said to him, "You are like a wise philosopher." Thomas said to him, "Rabbi, my mouth is utterly unable to say what you are like." And Yeshua said, "I am not your rabbi, because you have drunk, you are intoxicated from the bubbling spring I tended." And he took him to the window and withdrew and spoke 3 sayings to him. And when Thomas came back to his friends, they asked him, "What did Yeshua say to you?" And Thomas said, "If I tell you one of the sayings he spoke to me, you will pick up rocks and stone me, and fire will come out of the rocks and consume you." That's tough. That's like, whoa. So, let us pray that I don't anytime soon get told what Tama was told, unless I have already, in which case I'll quit trying to tell people. Except maybe other Tamas. It is the Lord who spoke with me. See now the completion of my redemption. I have given you a sign of these things, James, my brother. For not without reason have I called you my brother, although you are not my brother materially. I am not ignorant concerning you. So when I give you a sign, know and hear. Nothing existed except him who is. He is unnameable and ineffable. I myself am also unnameable from him who is, just as I have been given a number of names, 2 from him who is, and I am before you. Since you have asked concerning femaleness, femaleness existed, but femaleness was not first, and it prepared for itself powers and gods. But it did not exist when I came forth, since I am an image of him who is. But I have brought forth the image of him, so that the sons of him who is might know that things are theirs, and what things are theirs, and what things are alien to them. Behold, I shall reveal to you everything of this mystery, for they will seize me day after tomorrow. But redemption will be near. James said, "Rabbi, you have said they will seize me, but what can I do?" He said to me, "Fear not, James. They too will seize. You too will seize. But leave Jerusalem, for it is she who always gives up the cup of bitterness to the sons of light. She's a dwelling place of a great number of archons, but your redemption will be preserved from them, so that many understand who they are and what kinds they are. You will lacuna and listen. They are not lacuna, but archon lacuna. These 12 lacuna down, lacuna archons upon his own hebdomad. I don't know what hebdomad is. James said, Rabbi, there are then 12 hebdomads and not 7. There are 12 hebdomads and not 7 as there are in the scriptures. All right. Oh, it's hebdomads. Hippocratic corpus, term used by Neoplatonist philosophers such as Lambiacus and Proclus in reference to the intellect. Oh, the hebdomad, the 7 world-creating archons in most of the Gnostic systems. Damn. Reference to the intellect. That figures. Okay. And the Lord said, James, he who spoke concerning the scripture had a limited understanding. I, however, shall reveal to you what has come forth from him who has no number. I shall give you a sign concerning their number. And for what has come forth from him who has no measure, I shall sign concerning their measure. I shall give a sign concerning their measure. James said, Rabbi, behold then, I have received their number. There are 72 measures. The Lord said, these are the 72 heavens, which are their subordinates. These are the powers of all their might, and they were established by them. And these are they who were distributed everywhere, existing under the authority of the 12 archons. The inferior power among them brought forth for itself angels and unnumbered hosts. Him who is, however, has been given lacuna on account of lacuna. Him who is lacuna, they are unnumbered. If you want to give them a number now, you will not be able to do so until you cast away from your blind thought this bond of flesh which encircles you. And then you will reach him who is, and you will no longer be James. Rather, you are the one who is. And all those who are unnumbered will have been named. Rabbi, in what way shall I teach him who is, since all these powers and these hosts are armed against me? He said to me, these powers are not armed against you specifically, but are armed against another. It is against me that they are armed, and they are armed with other powers. But they are armed against me in judgment. They did not give blank to me in it, blank through them, blank in this place, blank suffering. I shall, lacuna, he will, lacuna, and I shall not rebuke them. But there shall be within me a silence and a hidden mystery. But I am faint-hearted before their anger. James said, Rabbi, if they arm themselves against you, then there is no blame. You have come with knowledge, that you might rebuke their forgetfulness. You have come with recollection, that you might rebuke their ignorance. But I was concerned because of you, for you descended into great ignorance, but you have not been defiled by anything in it. For you descended into great mindlessness, and your recollection remained. You walked in mud, and your garments were not soiled. You have not been buried in their filth. You have not been caught. And it was not like them, and I was not like them, but I clothed myself with everything of theirs. There is in me forgetfulness, yet I remember things that are not theirs. There is in me lacuna, and I am in their lacuna. Lacuna, knowledge, lacuna, not in their sufferings, lacuna. But I have become afraid before them, since they rule. For what will they do? What will I be able to say? Or what word will I be able to say that I may escape them? The Lord said, James, I praise your understanding and your fear. If you continue to be distressed, do not be concerned for anything else except your redemption. For behold, I shall complete this destiny upon the earth as I have said from the heavens, and I shall reveal to you your redemption. James said, Rabbi, how after these things will you appear to us again? After they seize you and you complete this destiny, you will go up to him who is, the Lord said. James, after these things I shall reveal to you everything. For your sake alone, not for your sake alone, but for the sake of the unbelief of men, so they may exist, so that faith may exist in them. For a multitude will attain faith, and they will increase in lacuna. And after this I shall appear for a reproof to the archons, and I shall reveal to them that he cannot be seized. If they seize him, then he will overpower each of them. But now I shall go. Remember the things I have spoken, and let them go up before you. James said, Lord, I shall hasten as you have said. And the Lord said farewell to him, and fulfilled what was fitting. When James heard of his suffering, he was much distressed. They awaited the signs of his coming. And he came after several days, and James was walking upon the mountain, which was called Galgulan, when his disciples, who listened to him because they had been distressed, and he was lacuna, a comforter, saying, this lacuna, second lacuna. And then the crowd dispersed, but James remained. Something prayer, something as was his custom. James remained. Continuously in prayer, always. And the Lord appeared to him. And he stopped his prayer and embraced him. He kissed him, saying, Rabbi, I have found you. I've heard of your sufferings which you endured, and I've been much distressed. My companions, you know. Therefore, on reflection, I was wishing that I would not see this people. They must be judged for these things they have done. For these things they have done are contrary to what is fitting. The Lord said, James, do not be concerned for me or for this people. I am he who was within me. Never have I suffered in any way, nor have I been distressed. And this people has done me no harm. But this people existed as a type of the archons, and it deserved to be destroyed through them. But something, the archons, something who has something. But since it, something angry with something, the just something is his servant. Therefore your name is James the Just. You see how you will become sober when you see me. You stop this prayer. Now, since you are a just man of God, you have embraced me and kissed me. Truly, I say to you that you have stirred a great anger and wrath against yourself. But this has happened so that the others might come to be. But James was timid and wept. He was very distressed. And they both sat down upon a rock. And the Lord said to him, James, thus you will undergo these sufferings. But do not be sad, for the flesh is weak. I will receive what has been ordained for it. But as for you, do not be timid or afraid. And the Lord ceased. Now when James heard these things, he wiped away the tears in his eyes, and very bitter something, which is something. The Lord said to him, James, behold, I shall reveal to you your redemption. When you are seized and you undergo these sufferings, a multitude will arm themselves against you, that they may seize you. And in particular, 3 of them will seize you, and they who sit there as toll collectors. Not only do they demand toll, but they also take away souls by theft. When you come into their power, one of them who is a guard will say to you, "Who are you, or where are you from?" And you are to say to him, "I am a son, and I am from the Father." And he will say to you, "What sort of son are you? And what father do you belong? And to what father do you belong?" And you are to say to him, "I am from the pre-existent Father, and a son in the pre-existent one." When he says to you, "The Cuna," something, you are to say to him, "Something in the something that I might." All right. Something of alien things, you are to say to him, "They are not entirely alien, but they are from Achamoth, who is the female. And these she produced as she brought down the race from the pre-existent one. So then they are not alien, but they are ours. They are indeed ours because she who is mistress of them is from the pre-existent one. In the same time, they are alien because the pre-existent one did not have intercourse with her when she produced them. When he also says to you, "Where will you go?" you are to say to him, "The place from which I have come, there shall I return." And if you say these things, you will escape their attacks. But when you come to these 3 detainers and take away souls by theft, in that place, something, these, you, something, a vessel, something much more, something of the one who you, something for something, her root. When you come to these 3 detainers, take away souls by theft in that place, these, these, you, something, a vessel, much more than something, the one whom you. But I shall call upon the imperishable knowledge, which is Sophia, who is in the Father, and who is in the mother of Achamoth. Achamoth had no father nor male consort, but she is female from a female. She produced you without a male, since she was alone and in ignorance as to what lives through her mother, because she thought that she alone existed. But I shall cry out to her mother, and they will fall into confusion and will blame their root and the race of their mother. But you will go up to what is yours, something, you will, something, the pre-existent one. They are a type of the 12 disciples and the 12 pairs. Achamoth, who is translated Sophia, and who I myself am, and who the imperishable Sophia is, through whom you will be redeemed, and who are all the sons of him who is. These things they have known and have hidden within them. You are to hide these things within you, and you are to keep silence. But you are to reveal them to Adai. When you depart, immediately war will be made with the land. Weep then for him who dwells in Jerusalem. But let Adai take these things to heart. In the 10th year, let Adai sit and write them down. And when he writes them down, and they are to receive something through him from his intellect. Now the younger of them is greater, and may these things remain hidden in him until he comes to the age of 17, beginning something through them. They will pursue him exceedingly, since they are from his something companions. He will be proclaimed through them, and they will proclaim this word. Then he will become a seed of blank, of something. James said, I am satisfied, something, they are something, my soul. Yet another thing I ask of you. Who are the 7 women who have been your disciples? And behold, all women bless you. I'm also amazed how powerless vessels have become strong by a perception which is in them. And the Lord said, you something well, something, a spirit of something. A spirit of thought, a spirit of counsel, a spirit of knowledge, of their fear. When we had passed through the breath of this archon who was named Adonaios, him, and he was ignorant. When I came forth from him, he remembered that I am a son of his. He was gracious to me at the time as his son. And then, before I appeared here, he cast them among the people, among this people, and from the place of heaven the prophets. James said, Rabbi, something altogether. Wow, there's a lot of lacuna in this. It's really a shame. Something in them, especially something. The Lord said, James, I praise you. Something, walk upon the earth. Something, the words, while he, lacuna on the lacuna. For cast away from you the cup, which is bitterness. For some from lacuna set themselves against you. For you have begun to understand their roots from beginning to end. Cast away from yourself all lawlessness, and beware lest they envy you. When you speak these words of this perception, encourage these 4, Salome and Miriam and Martha and Arsenoi. Since he takes some blank to me, he is blank burnt offerings and blank. But I blank not this way, but blank first fruits of the blank upward, so that the power of God might appear. The perishable has gone up to the imperishable, and the female element has attained to this male element. James said, Rabbi, into these 3 things then their blank been cast. Has their blank been cast? For they have been reviled, and they have been persecuted. Behold, blank everything blank from anyone. For you have received blank of knowledge, and blank that what is the blank, go blank. You will find lacuna. But I shall go forth and reveal that they believed in you, and that they may be content with their blessing and salvation. And this revelation may come to pass. And he went at the time immediately and rebuked the 12 and cast them out of contentment concerning the way of knowledge. And the majority of them, something, when they saw the messenger took something. The others blank said blank, him from this earth, for he is not worthy of life. These then were afraid. They arose, saying, we have no part in this blood, for a just man will perish through injustice. James departed, that blank looked blank, for we blank him. Wow. Yeah, I can't understand why people cherry pick scripture, but they're not interested in something this big. I guess I didn't come running to it immediately. Once I did, I was like, oh man. So, right, Gospel of Thomas. 21. Miriam said to Yeshua, "What are your students like?" He said, "They're like little children living in a field that is not theirs. When the owners of the field come, they will say, 'Give us our field, give our field back to us.' And the children take off their clothes in front of them and give it back. And they return their field to them. So I say, if the owner of the house knows that a thief is coming, he will be on guard before the thief arrives. He will not let the thief break into the house of his estate and steal his possessions. As for you, be on guard against the world. Arm yourself with great strength, or the robbers will find a way to reach you. For the trouble you expect will come. Let someone among you understand. Let the crop ripen. When the crop ripened, the reaper came quickly with a sickle in hand and harvested it. Whoever has ears should hear." Yeshua said, "I shall choose you as one from 1,000, and as two from 10,000, and they will stand as a single one." His students said, "Show us the place where you are. We must seek it." He said to them, "Whoever has ears should hear. There's a light within a person of light, and it shines on the whole world. If it does not shine, it is dark." Yeshua said, "Love your brother like your soul. Protect that person like the pupil of your eye." If you do not fast from the world, you will not find the kingdom. If you do not observe the Sabbath as a Sabbath, you will not see the Father. Okay. What are you supposed to do on Sabbath? Oh, maybe it means go to church. I wonder if there are any churches here in Albuquerque. Here in Albuquerque. Wait a minute. Yes, if you're going to do these things, do them without looking back. Happy birthday. You don't need me. I'll forget. I'll let P.D. Uspensky do it. All right, no more Facebook. Facebook is dumb. Facebook is stupid. Okay, back to Julian James. Now, assimilation is consciousized. Assimilation consciousized is conciliation. A better term for it might be compatibilization. But that seems something too rococo. What I am designating by conciliation. Let me make sure I'm screen sharing. There we go. What I'm designating by conciliation is essentially doing in mind space what narratization does in mind time or spatialized time. It brings things together as conscious objects, just as narratization brings things together as a story. And this fitting together into a consistency or probability is done according to rules built up in experience. In conciliation, we are making excerpts or narratizations compatible with each other. Just as in external perception, the new stimulus and the internal conception are made to agree. If we are narratizing ourselves as walking along a wooded path, the succession of excerpts is automatically made compatible with such a journey. Or if in daydreaming, two excerpts or narratizations happen to begin occurring at the same time, they are fused or conciliated. All right, we're going to have to back up. You've lost me here. Okay, 6, conciliation. The final aspect of consciousness I wish to mention here is modeled upon a behavioral process common to most mammals. It really springs from simple recognition, where a slightly ambiguous perceived object is made to conform to some previously learned schema. An automatic process, sometimes called assimilation. We assimilate new stimulus into our conception or schema about it, even though it is slightly different. Since we never from moment to moment see or hear or touch things in exactly the same way, this process of assimilation into previous experience is going on all the time as we perceive the world. We are putting things together into recognizable objects on the basis of the previously learned schema we have of them. Now, assimilation is consciousized in conciliation. A better term for it would be compatibilization, but that seems a little too rococo. I am designating by conciliation, what I'm designating is essentially doing in mind space what narratization does in mind time or spatialized time. It brings things together as conscious objects, just as narratization brings things together as a story. And this fitting together into a consistency or probability is done according to the rules built up in experience. In conciliation, we are making excerpts or narratizations compatible with each other. Just as in external perception, the new stimulus and the internal conception are made to agree. Oh, hold on, I got distracted. It brings things together as conscious objects, just as narratization brings things together as story. And this fitting together into a consistency or probability is done according to the rules built up in experience. In conciliation, we are making excerpts or narratizations compatible with each other. Just as in external perception, the new stimulus and the internal conception are made to agree. If we are narratizing ourselves as walking along a wooded path, the succession of excerpts is automatically made compatible with such a journey. Or if in daydreaming, two excerpts or narratizations happen to begin occurring at the same time, they are fused or conciliated. If in daydreaming, two excerpts or narratizations happen to begin occurring at the same time, they are fused or conciliated. What the hell does that mean? And if I ask you to think of a mountain meadow and a tower at the same time, you automatically, conciliate them by having the tower rising from the meadow. I get it. But if I ask you to think of the mountain meadow and an ocean at the same time, conciliation tends not to occur, and you are likely to think of one and then the other. You can only bring them together by narratization. Thus, there are principles of compatibility that govern this process. And such principles are learned and are based on the structures of the world. Makes sense. Let me summarize as a way of seeing where we are and the direction in which our discussion is going. We have said that consciousness is an operation rather than a thing, a repository, or a function. It operates by way of analogy, by way of constructing an analog space with an analog eye that can observe that space and move metaphorically in it. It operates on any reactivity, exerts relevant aspects, narratizes and conciliates them together into a metaphorical space where such meanings can be manipulated like things in space. Conscious mind is a spatial analog of the world, and mental acts are analogs of bodily acts. Consciousness operates only on objectively observable things, or, to say it another way, with echoes of John Locke, there's nothing in consciousness that is not an analog of something that was in behavior first. This has been a difficult chapter, but I hope I have sketched out with some plausibility that the notion of consciousness as a metaphor-generated model of the world leads to some quite definite deductions, and that these deductions are testable in our own everyday conscious experience. It is only, of course, a beginning, a somewhat rough-hewn beginning. which I hope to develop in future work. But it is enough to return now to our major inquiry into the origin of it all, saving further amplification of the nature of consciousness itself for later chapters. If consciousness is this invention of an analog world on the basis of language, paralleling the behavioral world even as the world of mathematics parallels the world of quantities of things, what then can we say about its origin? We have arrived at a very interesting point in our discussion, and one that is completely contradictory to all the alternative solutions to the problem of the origin of consciousness, which we discussed in the introductory chapter. For if consciousness is based on language, then it follows that it is of a much more recent origin than has heretofore been supposed. Consciousness come after language? The implication of such a position are extremely serious. The mind of Iliad. There's an awkward moment at the top of the Ferris wheel when, having come up the inside curvature, where we are facing into a firm structure of confident girders, suddenly that structure disappears, and we are thrust out into the sky for outward curve down. Such perhaps is the present moment for all the scientific alternatives that we are faced into. The introduction, including my own prejudgments about the matter, all assured us that consciousness was evolved by natural selection back somewhere in the mammalian evolution or before. We felt assured that at least some animals were conscious, assured that consciousness was related to some important way to the evolution of the brain and probably its cortex, and assured certainly that early man was conscious if he was learning language. These assurances have now disappeared, and we must thrust out into the sky a very new problem of our impressionistic development of a theory of consciousness in the last chapter, even pointing in the right direction. Then consciousness can only have arisen in the human species, and that development must have come after the development of language. Now, if human evolution were simple continuity, our procedure at this point would normally be to study the evolution of language, dating it as best we could. We would then try to trace out human mentality thereafter until we reach the goal of our inquiry, where we could claim by some criterion or other that here at last is the place and date of the origin of the beginning of consciousness. But human evolution is not a simple continuity. Into human history around 3000 BC comes a curious and very remarkable practice. It is the transmutation of speech into little marks on stone or clay or papyrus, so that speech can be rather than just heard and seen by anybody, not just those with earshot at the time. So, before pursuing the program and preceding paragraph, we should first try to date the origin of consciousness either before or after the invention of such seen speech by examining its earliest examples. Our present question then is, what is the mentality of the earliest writings of mankind? As soon as we go back to the first written records of man and to seek evidence for the presence or absence of a subjective conscious mind, we are immediately beset by the innumerable technical problems. The most profound of these is translating writings that have been issued from a mentality utterly different from our own. And this is particularly problematic in the very first human writings. These are in hieroglyphics, hieratic, and cuneiform form, all, interestingly enough, begun around 3000 BC. None of these is entirely understood. When the subjects are concrete, there is little difficulty. But when the symbols are peculiar and undermined by context, the amount of necessary guesswork turns this fascinating evidence into a Rorschach test, in which modern scholars project their own subjectivity with little awareness of the importance of their distortion. The indications here, I bet he's thinking of Sitchin when he says, the indications here as to whether the consciousness was present in the early Egyptian dynasties in the Mesopotamian cultures are thus too ambiguous for the kind of concerned analysis which is required. We shall return to these questions in Book 2. First writings in human history in a language which we have enough certainty of translation to consider it in connection with my hypothesis is the Iliad. Modern scholarship regards this revenge story of blood, sweat, and tears to have been developed by a tradition of bards or aodoi between about 1230 when, according to the inferences from some recently found Hittite tablets, the events of the epic occurred about 900 or 850 when it came to be written down. I propose here we regard the poem as a psychological document of immense importance, and the question we're to put to it is, what is the mind of the Iliad? The language of the Iliad is disturbingly interesting. There is no general consciousness in the Iliad. I am saying in general because I shall mention some exceptions later. And in general, therefore, no words for conscious or mental acts. The words of the Iliad that in later age come to mean mental things have different meanings, all of them more concrete. The word psyche, which later means soul or conscious mind, is in most instances life substances such as blood or breath. A dying warrior bleeds out his psyche into the ground or breathes it out in his last gasp. Wow. The thumos, which later comes to mean something like emotional soul, is simply motion or agitation. And when a man stops moving, the thumos leaves his limbs. But it is also somehow like an organ itself, or when Glaucus prays to Apollo to alleviate his pain, to give him strength to help his friend Sarpedon, Apollo hears his prayer and casts strength in his thumos. The thumos can tell a man to eat, drink, or fight. Interesting. Diomedes said in one place that Achilles will fight when the thumos in his chest tells him and a god rouses him. But it is not really an organ, not always localized. A raging ocean has thumos. A word of somewhat similar use is phren, which is always localized anatomically as the midriff, or sensations in the midriff, and is usually used in plural. The phrenes of Hector that recognize that his brother is not near him. This means that by catching someone's breath in surprise, it is only centuries later that it comes to mean the mind or heart in a figurative sense. Perhaps more important is the word nous, which spelled nous later in Greek comes to mean conscious mind. It comes from the word knowing, to see. The proper translation of the Iliad would be something like perception or recognition or field of vision. Zeus holds Odysseus in his nous, and he keeps watch over him. Another important word, which perhaps comes from the doubling of the word meros, is mermera. Oh, marmarconi, meaning it is two parts. This was made into a verb by adding the ending iso, the common suffix which can turn a noun into a verb. The resulting word being murmur easing, to be put into two parts about something. Modern translator, for the sake of a supposed literary quality of their work, often use modern terms and subjective categories which are not true to the original. Murmurzine was thus wrongly translated as to ponder, to think, to be of divided mind, to be troubled about, to try to decide. But essentially it means to be in conflict about two actions, not two thoughts. It's always behavioristic. And it's said several times of Zeus, as well as of the others. The conflict is often said to go on in the thymos, or sometimes the phrenes, but never in the nous. The eye cannot doubt or be in conflict, as the soon-to-be-invented conscious mind will be able to. The words are, in general, and with certain exceptions, the closest that anyone, authors or characters or gods, usually get to having conscious minds or thoughts. We shall be entering the meaning of these words more carefully in a later chapter. There are also no concept of will or word for it. Concept of developing curiosity curiously late in Greek thought. Thus, Iliadic men will have no will of their own and certainly no notion of free will. Instead, the whole problem of volition, so troubling, I think, to modern psychological theory, may have had its difficulties because the words for such phenomenon were invented so late. A similar absence from the Iliadic language is a word for body in our sense. The word soma, which is the 5th century BC, comes to mean body, is always in the plural in Homer and means dead limbs or corpse. It is opposite of the psyche. There are several words which are used for various parts of the body, and in Homer it is always these parts that are referred to, and never the body as a whole. So, not surprisingly, the early Greek art of the Mycenae and its period shows man as an assembly of strangely articulated limbs, the joints underdrawn and the torso almost separated from the hips. It is graphically what we find again and again in Homer, who speaks of hands, lower arms, upper arms, feet, calves, and thighs, and being fleet, sinewy, in speedy motion, etc., with no mention of the body as a whole. Now, this is all very peculiar. If there is no subjective consciousness, no mind, soul, or will in Iliadic men, then what initiates behavior? The religion of the early Greeks. The body as a whole, that's a footnote here. Bruno Snell, The Discovery of the Mind. I was well along into the ideas and material of this chapter before knowing of Snell's parallel work in Homeric language. Our conclusions, however, are quite different. Okay. There's an old and general idea that there was no true religion in Greece before the 4th century BC. 3 excerpts of E.R. Dodd's superb book, The Greeks and the Irrational, for 4th century BC, and that the gods in the Homeric poems are merely a gay invention of poets. And it has been noted by scholars. Example, Maurice Bourawa, Tradition and Design of the Iliad. The reason for this erroneous view is that religion is being thought of as a system of ethics, as a kind of bowing down to external gods in an effort to behave virtuously. And indeed, in this sense, scholars are right. But to say that the gods in the Iliad are merely inventions of the authors, and the epic is to completely misread what is going on. The characters of the Iliad do not sit down and think about what to do. They have no conscious mind such as we say we have, and certainly no introspection. It is impossible for us, with our subjectivity, to appreciate what it was like. With Agamemnon, the king of men, robs Achilles of his mistress. It is a god that grasps Achilles by his yellow hair and warns him not to strike Agamemnon. It is a god who then rises out of the gray sea and consoles him in his tears of wrath on the beach by his black ships. A god who whispers low to Helen to sweep her heart with homesick longing. A god who hides Paris in the mist in front of the attacking Menelaus. Menelaus, I don't know. A god who tells Glaucus to take bronze for gold. A god who leads the armies into battle, who speaks soldier at a turning point, who debates and teaches Hector what he must do, who urges soldiers and defeats them from casting in spells or drawing mist in their visual field. It is gods who start quarreling among men, that really caused the war, and they plan its strategy. Jeez, this is straight up archons. It is one God who makes Achilles promise not to go into battle, another who urges him to go, and another who then clothes him in a golden fire reaching up to heaven and screams through his throat across the bloody trench of the Trojans, rousing them in ungovernable panic. In fact, the gods take the place of consciousness. The beginnings of action are not in conscious plans, reasons, and motives. They are in the actions and speeches of gods. To another, a man seems to be the cause of his own behavior, but not to the man himself. When toward the end of the war, Achilles reminds Agamemnon how he robbed him of his mistress, the king declares, "Not I was the cause of that act, but Zeus and my portion, and the Erinyes who walk in darkness. They it was in the assembly put wild hate upon me, and that day when I arbitrarily took Achilles' prize from him. So what could I do? Gods always have their way." Holy crap. And that this was no particular fiction of Agamemnon's to evade responsibility is clear in that this explanation is fully accepted by Achilles, for Achilles is also obedient to the gods. Scholars who, in commenting on this passage, say Agamemnon's behavior has become alien to his ego, do not nearly go far enough. For the question is indeed, what is the psychology of the Iliadic hero? And I am saying that he did not have any ego whatever. Even the poem itself is not wrought by men in our sense. It is first three words, Mene ade Thei, or of wrath sing, O goddess. The entire epic which follows is the song of the goddess which the entranced bard heard chanted to his iron-aged listeners among the ruins of Agamemnon's world. If we erase all our preconceptions about poetry and act towards the poem as if we had never heard the poetry before, the abnormal quality of the speech would immediately arrest us. We call it meter nowadays, but what a different thing. These steady hexameters of pitch stresses from the looser jumble of accents in the ordinary dialogue. The function of meter in poetry is to drive the electrical activity of the brain, and most certainly to relax the normal emotional inhibitions of both chanter and listener. A similar thing occurs when Muhammad the Proclaimer. A similar thing occurs when the voices of schizophrenics speak in scanning rhythms or rhyme. Except for its later accretions, then, the epic itself was neither consciously composed nor consciously remembered, but was successively and creatively changed with more awareness than a pianist has in his improvisation. Who were these gods that pushed men about like robots and sang epics through their lips? They were voices whose speech and directions could be distinctly heard by the Iliadic heroes as voices are heard by certain epileptic and schizophrenic patients. Or just as Joan of Arc heard voices, the gods were organizations of the central nervous system and can be regarded as personae in the sense of poignant consistencies through time, amalgams of parental admonitory images. The god is a part of the man. And quite consistent with the conception is the fact that the god never stepped outside of natural laws. Greek gods cannot create anything out of nothing, unlike Hebrew God of Genesis. In the relationship between the god and the hero, in their dialectic, there are the same courtesies, emotions, persuasions that might occur between two people. The Greek god never steps forth in thunder, never begats awe or fear in the hero, and is as far from the outrageously pompous god of Job as it is possible to be. He simply leads, advises, and orders. Nor does the god occasion humility or even love and little gratitude. Indeed, I suggest that the god-hero relationship was, by being its progenitor, similar to the referent of the ego-superego relationship of the Freud or self-generalized other relationship of need. Now, this is starting to make sense. The strongest emotion which the hero feels towards a god is amazement or wonder, the kind of emotion that we feel when the solution of a particularly difficult problem suddenly pops into our heads, or in the cry of Eureka for Archimedes in his bath. From Archimedes. The gods are what we now call hallucinations. I think not. Usually they are only seen and heard by particular heroes they are speaking to. Sometimes they come in mists or out of the gray sea or in a river or from the sky, suggesting visual auras preceding them. But at other times they simply occur. Usually they come as themselves, commonly as mere voices, but sometimes as other people closely related to the hero. Wow. Apollo's relation to Hector is particularly interesting in this regard. In Book 16, Apollo comes to Hector as his maternal uncle. Then in Book 17, as one of his allied leaders. And later in the same book, as his dearest friend from abroad. Holy crap. The denouement of the whole epic comes when Athene, who, after telling Achilles to kill Hector, then comes to Hector as his dearest brother, Deiphobus. Trusting in him, his second, Hector challenges Achilles, demands Deiphobus another spear, and turns to find nothing is there. We would say he has had an hallucination. So has Achilles. The Trojan War was directed by hallucinations. And the soldiers who were so directed were not all like us. They were noble automatons who knew not what they did. Well, that last part you got right. The bicameral mind. The picture then is one of strangeness and heartlessness and emptiness. It's true. We cannot approach these heroes by inventing mind spaces behind their fierce eyes as we do each other. Iliadic man did not have subjectivity as we do. He had no awareness of his awareness of the world and no internal mind space to introspect upon. In distinction to our own subjective conscious minds, we can call the mentality of the Mycenaeans a bicameral mind. Volition, planning, initiative is organized with no consciousness whatever and then told to the individual in his familiar language, sometimes with the visual aura of a familiar friend or authority figure or God, or sometimes as a voice alone. The individual obeyed these hallucinated voices because he could not see what to do by himself. The evidence for the existence of such a mentality as I have just proposed is not meant to rest solely in the Iliad. On the other, it is rather that the Iliad suggests the hypothesis that in later chapters I shall attempt to prove or refute by examining the remains of the other civilizations of antiquity. Nevertheless, it would be persuasive at this time to bring up certain objections to the preceding, which will help clarify some of the issues before going on. Objection. It is not true that some scholars have considered the poem to be entirely the invention of one man, Homer, and with no historical basis whatever, even doubting whether Troy even existed at all. In spite of Schliemann's famous discoveries in the 19th century? Reply, this doubt has recently been put to rest by the discovery of Hittite tablets. Clearly refer to the Achaeans and their king Agamemnon. The Greek catalog of Greek places that send ships to Troy in Book 2 corresponds remarkably closely to the pattern of settlement which archaeology has discovered. The treasures at Mycenae, once thought to be fairy tales in the imagination of the poet, have been dug out in the silted ruins of the city. Other details mentioned in the Iliad, the manners of burial, the kinds of armor, such as the precisely described boar's tusk helmet, have been unearthed and in sites relevant to the poem. There is no question of historical substrate. The Iliad is not imaginative creative literature, hence not a matter for literary discussion. It is history webbed into the Mycenaean Aegean, but examined by psychohistorical scientists. The problem of single or multiple authorship of the poem has been endlessly debated by classical scholars for at least a century, but this establishment of an historical basis, even of artifacts mentioned in the poem, must indicate that there were many intermediaries who verbally transmitted whatever happened in the 19th century to succeeding ages. It is thus more plausible to think of the creation of the poem as part of this verbal transmission that as the work of a single man named Homer in the 9th century BC. Homer, if he existed, may simply have been the first Aeodos to be transcribed. Objection. Even if this is so, what basis is there to suppose an epic poem whose earliest manuscript that we know of is a recension from Alexandria scholars of the 4th and 3rd century BC, which obviously must have existed in many forms, as we read it today, was put together out of them? And how can a poem of this sort be regarded as indicative of what the actual Mycenaeans of the 13th century BC were like? Reply. I'll hold off on the reply. Pat Hunky. He's his hip massage because it increases his blood flow. Come on. Oh. Uh,